Pogodzinski.
Yeah, he's going to be our speaker today. Henry's a retired English teacher from John F. Kennedy High School. He said he kind of focused on British history. Today's American history, right? And tomorrow he's going to come and visit us again as one of our presidents. He's going to dress like a president. The 11th president. Anybody know who that is? Oh. See, they already know. But we welcome this talk. This is going to be fun today. So thank you, dear. Thank you. Thank you.
Do I need this microphone? Can you hear me?
Use the microphone. Use the microphone.
Because then you can rest.
Yeah, but you didn't use it. You didn't use it.
Well,
We only spoke for a short time though. You
Yeah,
only talked for
please
a while.
use it. Yeah.
If you can hear me,
It'll help your voice though as you talk.
my voice is no matter. It's their hearing after
Well,
Use the mic for the people at home.
Excuse me, some of us are hearing impaired, so
Yes.
we do appreciate it.
Thank you very much. You pronounced it well.
Thank you, dear. Thank you.
And the President of the United States will be here tomorrow, the 11th of the United States. James Knox will be here to address you, to be with you, to socialize with you if you wish. And he will be dressed not in a costume, but he will be dressed as a 19th century politician. And so if you want to meet the president, I'll be here tomorrow. But thank you very, very much for allowing me to spend some time with you this afternoon. I really do appreciate the invitation and the pleasure of being here with you. But am I being facetious or otherwise? Well, let's say, to pose the question to you, have you ever had issues with the United States Postal Service? Well, you all have, things go wrong, mail not delivered late. So, that's not gonna happen here this afternoon. Because we are going to look at the Pony Express. Now, it was a mail delivery system, okay, to be sure. But it was much more than that. It is very, very short life. We'll get into that in a moment. But the Pony Express, in 1869, the United States Post Office, excuse me while I get my glasses out. There we are. The United States Post Office issued the first United States postage stamp to depict an actual historic event. Up to that point, the postage stamps bore the image of important historic characters such as George Washington, Benjamin Franklin, Thomas Jefferson, Andrew Jackson. The event shown on the new stamp was the Pony Express. The stamp was at times mistaken for an actual stamp, an actual postage stamp, which it wasn't. It was a stamp used by the service. The issue, which was released in 1869, was known as the Pony Express stamp. It was issued to honor and remember the riders who traveled the long and dangerous miles and to commemorate the service they provided to the nation. In 1940 and again in 1960, commemorative stamps were issued for the 80th and 100th anniversary of the Pony Express. On the 24th of January, 1848, James W. Marshall discovered gold, oh boy, gold in California at Sutter's Mill. People on the West Coast were feverish to strike it rich, but poor communication from the east to the east would delay the so-called 49ers. They were actually 50ers, they weren't 49ers. The gold rush that parted the country for 16 months. And they didn't hear about that back east. They did not hear of the gold strike until 16 months after it happened. The government did not even confirm the discovery of gold until December of 1848. Over the next several years, miners, investors, and businessmen would come to California seeking their fortunes. By 1860, the population of California would swell to over 500,000 people. In 1850, California entered the Union as a free state, non-slave. It was the 31st state. The pressure mounted from all points for elected United States government representatives to provide a faster method of communication between the East and the West. In 1848, the Post Office Department awarded a contract to the Pacific Mail Steamship Company to carry the mail to California. It entitled the mail to be carried from New York City to Panama and there to be taken across the isthmus by horseback or rail. Once on the Pacific shore, the mail was put aboard ships bound for San Francisco. Under the best conditions, it took a letter 3 to 4 weeks, and at times longer, to reach its destination. All in all, it was the most optimistic schedule to deliver the mail east to west. Both North and South desired resources found in California, but sectional differences precluded any plan to encourage a successful way to increase the mail service. The railroads only extended to the Mississippi at that time and no further. The telegraph linking east and west had not yet been completed. It still had more than 1 year to go before it was finished. Some mail was transported by stagecoach beginning on 15 September 1858. The contract for a cross-country mail service was awarded to the Overland Mail Company, operated by Mr. John Butterfield. The stages were used on what they called the Southern Route, which was 2,795 miles long and which traveled between Tipton, Missouri and San Francisco. The advertised travel time was 24 days. But as with the New York-Panama route, travel time remained sorely optimistic. Cross-country travel prior to the stagecoach contract was often delayed by months. Californians learned of their state's admission to the Union 6 weeks after the state was officially admitted. 6 weeks. California Senator William Gwynn was the butt of a joke in that it would take so long for him to reach Washington, his tenure in office would expire before he reached Congress. Everybody had a good laugh about that. In December of 1859, Senator Gwynn, suggested to Congress that an alternate mail route to California from the east was a viable alternative to be explored. This route was called the Central Route, and as it would be called, it was 800 miles shorter than the Southern Route. The mail would be called the Overland Route that would start at St. Joseph, Missouri, and reach San Francisco by way of Sacramento. It wouldn't go all the way to San Francisco, it stopped at Sacramento. Senator Gwynn discussed his alternative route with William Russell, who embraced a fast mail delivery plan. Russell convinced his partners, Alexander Majors and William B. Waddell, of the alternate mail service, and the 3 men set out to establish the Central Overland California and Pikes Peak Express Company, which would become the Pony Express. All 3 men were well experienced in the freight business and employed 6,000 men. They owned 75,000 oxen and thousands of wagons and warehouses. This was a sawmill, a meatpacking plant, a bank, and an insurance company. On March 2nd, 1860, St. Joseph, Missouri was selected as the eastern terminus, while everyone knew Sacramento would be the western terminus. St. Joseph was the ideal location for the eastern end of the express because it was connected to the East Coast by railroad and telegraph. The route west stretched 1,966 miles through the plains of Kansas and into Nebraska Territory, Colorado, Wyoming, Utah, Nevada, and into California. It traveled along the valley of the Platte River, across the Great Plains, the Great Plateau, through the Rockies, and into the valley of the Great Salt Lake. Finally, through the alkali deserts of Nevada Territory, then over the Sierras, and then into the Sacramento Valley. 1,966 miles. I rounded up to 2,000. My own benefit. Since I can't keep saying 1,966, it's all 2,000 miles. The mail was then carried aboard steamship. Once it got to Sacramento, aboard steamship, and for the final leg to San Francisco. Now listen to this. Elapsed time en route was scheduled to take 10 days. 10 days to travel 2,000 miles. The Pony Express was organized and activated in a mere 2 months. They set it up and activated it 2 months. On 16 June 1860, about 10 weeks after the Pony Express began operations, Congress authorized a bill instructing the Secretary of the Treasury to subsidize the building of a transcontinental telegraph line to connect the Missouri River and the Pacific Coast. The two companies which were to build this communication link were the Overland Telegraph Company of California and the Pacific Telegraph Company of Nebraska. Of the three owners of the new mail route, it fell to Alexander Majors to assume the major tasks in launching the service. He delegated the responsibilities for overseeing the mail route to one Benjamin Ficklin. As superintendent, Ficklin set up the route into 5 divisions and hired overseers to run each division. Station keepers, stock tenders, and riders were hired along the route. 80 riders, 185 or more stations, 400 horses, and several hundred personnel were gathered during January and February 1860. Over 185 stations were used along the route. Station and station keepers were essential for the smooth operation of the mail system. Some stations were isolated and subject to dangerous and at times fatal episodes. The stations were located 5 to 25 miles apart. At each swing station, riders would exchange their tired mounts for fresh ones, while home stations, every third station that is, so it's every, let's say 75, 80 miles. They provided room for the riders, room, rest, and food for the riders. Each rider rode about 75 miles a day. At home stations, extra ponies, firearms, and provisions were kept. And here at these stations, the mail would be handed over to a new rider every 75 miles, but they changed horses every 15 to 20 miles. The best time for delivering the mail came in March 1861, when riders carried President Lincoln's inaugural address from Fort Kearny, Nebraska Territory to California in just 7 days. 7 days. One rider, Pony Boy Hassan, rode 120 miles in 8 hours and 20 minutes. And we'll discuss Mr. Haskell momentarily. Enters into our presentation in just a few moments. Speed. Speed was the essential goal. Faster, fast, fast. Delivering the mail in the advertised 10 days, both westward and eastward. Don't forget, they went both ways. That red line, okay, from St. Joseph to Sacramento, and then from Sacramento back to St. Joseph. Both ways. Most of the Pony Express riders were wiry men who weighed between 100 and 125 pounds. It's a modern day jockey, horse race jockey. The average age was 20 years old, but it wasn't unusual for teenagers as young as 14 to be hired. One man named Bronco Charlie Miller claimed that he was only 11 years old when he rode for the Express. The riders received $125 to $150 a month as pay, and he rode day and night. As an advertisement for riders allegedly read, wanted, young, skinny, wiry fellows not over 18, must be expert riders, willing to risk death daily, orphans preferred. Now, to be sure, a disturbing announcement, but probably a myth, because there's no historian has been able to find an ad in contemporary newspapers that said orphans were preferred. Okay, so that may be a fairy tale, but you can imagine, I mean, orphans preferred. Alexander Majors was a deeply religious man, and he furnished each rider with his own Bible. He also required each rider to swear an oath. I do hereby swear before the great and living God that during my engagement and while an employee of Russell, Majors, and Waddell, that I will under no circumstances use profane language, that I will drink no intoxicating liquors, that I will not quarrel or fight with any other employee of the firm, and that in every respect I will conduct myself honestly, be faithful to my duties, and so direct all my acts as to win the confidence of my employees from employers. So help me God. But it appears that very few Pony Express riders follow the pledge to the letter. Alexander Majors, who were the three founders of Pony Express, shouldered most of the organizational work. He acquired more than 400 horses for the project. He selected horses from around the Western lands, paying an average of $200 for each mount. These horses were on average of about 14 and a half hands, that is about 58 inches high, and weighed less than 900 pounds each. At the western end of the Pony Express route in California, W.W. Finney purchased 100 head of short-coupled stock, which were called California stock. But A.B. Miller purchased another 200 native mounts in and around Salt Lake. The horses were chosen for their stamina and their endurance. During his route of 80 to 100 miles, the express rider would change mounts 8 to 10 times. The horses were ridden at a fast trot, a canter, or a gallop. They moved around 10 to 15 miles an hour. But at times they were driven in full gallop at speeds of up to 25 miles an hour. The various types of horses ridden by the express riders include Morgans and thoroughbreds, which are often used on the eastern end of the mail route. Mustangs were often used on the western end of the mail route, which was the most rugged part of the route traveled. The horses were ridden quickly between stations, an average of 15 miles, and then relieved. A fresh horse was exchanged for the one that had just arrived. The riders from the Pony Express rode their mounts at a quick pace between stations, so every consideration was made to reduce the overall weight the horse had to carry. To help reduce that weight, a special lightweight saddle had to be designed and made. One Israel Landis had come to St. Joseph in 1844 and opened a saddle and harness shop there, his business flourished. And when the Pony Express was founded in St. Joseph, Landis was the ideal candidate to design and create a new saddle using less leather, and fewer metallic wood and components. He fashioned a saddle that was similar in design to the regular stock saddle generally used in the West at the time. It certainly bears no resemblance to the saddle that you and I are familiar with from the 1870s, 1880s, with the big saddle, everybody, that big heavy thing they carry around. It wasn't that way at all. The mail pouch was a separate component to the saddle that made the Pony Express a unique service. Standard mail pouches for horses were never used because of their size and their shape. And attaching it from one saddle to another saddle would consume too much time. Delay in changing mounts and mail bags at each station would accumulate so much lost time that the Pony Express delivery schedule would be severely affected. To cut down on weight and facilitate swift horse and rider changes, therefore, the Pony Express used a special type of mail bag known as a moquilla, which is a Spanish word for knapsack. It would consist of a leather cover, which was draped over the saddle and held in place by the rider's weight. The rider literally sat on the mail. And he sat, and it was featured 4 padlock pockets, 3 for mail and 1 for the rider's time card. And it was capable of holding 20 pounds of mail. At each relief station, riders would simply grab the moquilla of one mount, throw it on over the next horse, jump into the saddle, and they were gone. Elapsed time to change, 2 minutes. Those were box-shaped compartments in the mail. They were called changing the riders, and as I just said, was accomplished in just 2 minutes. Eventually, the express mount carried 1 saddle, 1 rider with a revolver and a water sack and the mail pouches, no more than 165 pounds. The identity of the first rider is disputed, but most historians believe it was one man named Johnny Frog. He was hired in St. Joseph to ride the 80 miles to Seneca, Kansas, which named the First Division. The mail was placed in the specially made moquilla, and after many speeches were given prior to the rider's departure, and around 7:15 p.m., William Russell turned the mail pouch over to Frog, who dashed down the landing to the foot of Jules Street, where the ferry boat Denver, alerted by a signal cannon, waited to carry horse and rider across the Missouri River to Elwood, Kansas. The date was April 3rd, 1860, and Fry covered the initial 80 miles at a speed of 12.5 miles an hour, that including all the stops. In Sacramento, on the same date, at noon, Harry Roth left with the mail heading east. On April 9th, 1860, at 6:46 p.m., the rider from the east reached Salt Lake City, Utah, and on 12 April, the mail reached Carson City, Nevada, at 2:30 in the afternoon. The riders then rode over the Sierra Nevadas through Placerville, California, and then on to Sacramento, where the mail was transferred to a steamboat for the trip to San Francisco. Close to midnight, on April 14th, 1860, the first mail was delivered to San Francisco. In all, 85 pieces of mail were delivered, including a letter from President James Buchanan to Governor Downey, along with other official government documents, newspapers from New York City, Chicago, St. Louis, and other important documents from banks and commercial establishments. On the same day, the 14th, when the mail reached California, the rider from the west delivered the mail to St. Joseph, Missouri at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Both deliveries, east-west, were made in just 10 days. 10 days. The express riders rode day and night in all weather. Oppressive heat and bitter cold didn't stop them. But from May to June 1860, the mail service was disturbed by what became known as the Pyramid Lake War. A Paiute Indian was brutalized at the Williams Station in Nevada on May 7, 1860, and 4 white men were killed. The hostilities which resulted caused a delay in the mail delivery. The Paiutes attacked the Pony Express relay stations throughout May and part of June, when the military was called in to escort the riders for some time. After 8 weekly trips from both St. Joseph and Sacramento, the service was suspended. It was stopped. The interruption caused Russell Majors and Waddell to suffer over $70,000 in lost revenue. Employees at the isolated relay stations lost their lives in the attacks by the Paiutes. 7 express stations were attacked and 16 employees were killed. 150 express horses were either stolen or driven off. According to the National Park Service, 6 Pony Express riders were also slain. Those employees who worked on those isolated stations had no one to defend them. One of those men or boys who worked at one of those stations was James Butler Hickok, Wild Bill. Once the Army intervened in June, the turmoil ended. 4 delayed mail shipments from the East finally were delivered to San Francisco on June 25th, 1860. During this brief war, one express mailing, which left San Francisco on the 21st of July, 1860, did not reach its destination. The mail pouch did not reach St. Joseph and thereafter New York City until 2 years later, delay of 2 years. In May 1860, Robert Ponyboy Haslam rode off to cover his mail route. It would be the most legendary ride in the history of the Pony Express. He's 20 years old and was scheduled to make his usual 75-mile run from Friday's Station east to Buckland Station in Nevada Territory. When he arrived at Buckland and was ready to hand the mail to the next rider, Johnson Richardson, Mr. Richardson refused to ride. He didn't want to go because he was fearful of the danger station from a raiding Paiute tribe. This was the only time a rider refused to run his route. Haslam felt it was his duty to continue the extra mail run. Richardson was branded a coward. Mounting a fresh horse, Haslam rode on, eventually completing a 190-mile ride and delivering the mail to Smith's Station. After a brief rest, Haslam mounted a fresh horse and retraced the way west, this time all the way back to Friday's Station. He passed at one point a relay station which had been burned by the marauding Paiutes. By the time Pony Boy returned to his home station, he had traveled 380 miles in less than 40 hours. A momentous run, and it remains today a Pony Express record. On 16 June 1860, Congress authorized a bill instructing the Secretary of the Treasury to subsidize the building of a transcontinental telegraph line connecting the West Coast to the Missouri River. About 10 weeks after the Pony Express began delivering the mail, the speed of the Pony Express did not come cheaply. In the early days of its life of service, it cost, for every half ounce of mail, cost $5 to deliver it by the Express. And by July 61, it was down to $2.50. And then it came down to $1. The initial price was 250 times the price of mail through the normal mail service. east to west. A letter sent from New York City to the east of the Mississippi River cost 2 cents. The founders of the Express had hoped to win an exclusive mail contract from the United States government, but that was not going to happen. The Express mail service was mainly used to deliver newspaper reports, government dispatches, and business documents, most of which were printed on tissue-thin paper to keep the costs and the weight down. Those corresponding by letter shied away from sending mail by Pony Express due to the cost. It was so high. Still, the speed of the mail deliveries west to east and east to west made the service attractive to business and to commerce. On March 4th, 1861, President Lincoln's inaugural address was telegraphed to Fort Kearny, Nebraska Territory, and the Pony Express delivered it to Placerville, California, to be telegraphed from there to the West Coast. That extraordinary writer, Robert Ponyboy Haslam, carried the news of the address on his run and was attacked by the Indians. Haslam, wounded, completed a 120-mile ride in a record 8 hours and 20 minutes. It takes me, I'm from Massachusetts, and it takes me 5.5 hours to drive 355 miles to my home state. On 26 July 1861, the Overland Telegraph reached Fort Churchill in Nevada from the west and a few miles west of Fort Kearny, Nebraska from the east. The run of the Pony Express was reduced to just 7 days. By the August 13th, Pony Express news was being telegraphed to San Francisco a whole 2 days before the express letters would arrive. By the 18th of September, the telegraph line was extended from Fort Kearny a further 100 miles. The Pony Express riders would take the mail to Julesburg, Colorado, and from there messages would be sent to a telegraph station 250 miles east. There, express riders would take the messages to the next telegraph station coming from the west, and from that station, the mail would be dispatched to San Francisco. The Pony Express discontinued mail service 2 days after the Western Union Telegraph Company completed its transcontinental telegraph network at Salt Lake City. The Express was no longer needed, and on the 24th of October, 1861, it was gone. It had operated for 19 months, and its riders had successfully delivered some 35,000 pieces of mail and had ridden more than 500,000 miles across the American frontier. Russell, Majors, and Waddell did not receive the contract to deliver the mail so they wished to have. The contract was instead awarded to one Jeremy DeWoot in March of 1861, who had taken over the southern and the congressionally favored Butterfield Overland stage line. The so-called stagecoach king, Ben Holiday, acquired the Pony Express relay stations for his stagecoaches. The Express was never profitable. The service was severely interrupted during the Pyramid Lake Wars and lost a great deal of money. It continued to lose cash over the next few months due to high operational costs and the failure to secure a government mail contract. When the service was terminated in October 1861, it had grossed only $90,000 and lost over $200,000. In 1866, after the Civil War, Holiday sold the Pony Express along with what was left of the Butterfield stage line to Wells Fargo for $1.5 million. There are only 250 known examples of Pony Express remain. The continued link to remembrance and popularity of the Express goes to the credit of Buffalo Bill Cody, his autobiographies, and he wrote more than one, and his Wild West show. The first book dedicated solely to the Pony Express was not published until 1900. In his first autobiography published in 1879, Buffalo Bill claims to have been an express rider at the age of 14. He even claimed that he once rode a record 384 miles in a single run. Now, Cody certainly worked as a messenger for the Express, but there is no record of him ever carrying the mail. And evidence suggests he was probably in school in Kansas during the brief history of the Pony Express. An interesting contrast comes to my mind. I have two sisters, both younger. One lives in New York City, and the other lives on the Cape Cod in Hull, Massachusetts. From New York City to Hull, Massachusetts is 214 miles. Now, both of these girls have birthdays in February, as a matter of fact, a week apart. My youngest sister, the two, Nancy, sent her sister Susan a birthday gift, New York City to Hull. It took 28 days to travel 214 miles. The Pony Express traveled 2,000 miles to deliver the mail from St. Joseph to Sacramento, and took 10 days to deliver the mail. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, I complete my review and my presentation. Thank you very much. Anything? I would tell my students, questions, comments, criticisms. Yes.
Could you tell us again how much the rider was paid, and how does that compare with what other people at the time were earning, like an average labor?
He carried a time, the rider carried a time card. He carried a time card with him in his saddlebag. He was paid between $100 and $125 a month to ride. Now, one rider would ride 80 miles and then hand it off to another rider. And let's say one rider heading east to west, he rode 80 miles and stopped and then transferred it to another rider. One rider coming west to east would stop at that same station and give the mail back to that first rider who would turn around and go back the other way. So they rode both ways, about 160 miles, okay, 80 miles one way, 80 miles the other way. Compared to what they were making, a laborer, let's say, would be making, he probably would be on a par, if not making a little bit more. I mean, he took chances. He carried a weapon. He carried a pistol. And as I said, 6 riders were killed during that Indian War, that short Indian War. So they were in jeopardy, and they rode all along. They rode day and night, and they didn't stop except at those stations. So, I mean, with that in mind, and the effort that was put into those riders, and the stamina that they needed to continue those rides, probably justified what they were paying. $125 a month. Yes, ma'am.
Oh, the danger, is it they were gonna have the mail stolen, or they were gonna be robbed of horses? What's the danger? I mean,
What was the danger?
yeah,
Well, the danger was if a horse stumbled, let's say, he doesn't have another man. I mean, he's out there all alone. I mean, you know, no one's going to come out to get him because he can't call for help. So he could die of exposure, thirst. He could do it that way. Of course, during the Indian War, 6 of them were killed. So I mean, there was, as that advertisement said, you know, there's danger of fatality. You could die out there. And they didn't, as I said, I keep emphasizing this, and forgive me if I wear it down, but those guys rode day and night. And they were young. I mean, they were kids, all right? If you want to put it that way, they were kids. I mean, I believe it. Some of them were young as 14, 15, you know, and where did they go? Orphans preferred. You know, if they were lost, who would care? I mean, they had nobody, mother, father, sister, brother. So, I mean, the chances they took for the money they were paid, it's astounding when you think about that. I mean, and, we don't consider, just consider that. Those men rode day and night through anything, snowstorms, rainstorms, flood, whatever. Texas. I mean, all of that stuff. They took chances. There were no bridges across those rivers. They rode in the desert and everything else. So, I mean, to do what they did and the amount of time it took them to do it is just mind-boggling. I mean, it is. It's just an awesome, awesome thing to do. And it lasted for only 18 months. As soon as that telegraph was finished, that was it. The Pony Express was done. Now they could go tick, 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 and then we would go across that area by telegraph wire. You didn't need the Pony Express anymore. And it was abolished. 2 days after that telegraph became effective, the Pony Express was finished. 2 days, done. And that was it. And who remembers those guys? I mean, yes, sir.
Just one more question. So the Pony Express didn't just stop the entire route all at once. As the telegraph line took over part of a route,
Yeah.
they would quit riding that
Yeah,
section.
right.
And they would fill in the gaps
Yeah.
until all the gaps were filled by telegraph.
That's right. And once that telegraph stretched from California to Missouri, that was it. It was finished. You have no need. And they just faded. 18 months. Who remembers the Pony Express? There was a movie on Pony Express. I don't know who was it. So, but I mean, was it true to life? Was it historically accurate? There was a question I gave this presentation earlier this year, and one question was: are there any way stations still existing? Can you visit them? And the answer is yes. There is no museum dedicated solely to the Express. There isn't one, or one that I couldn't find. But there are way stations still out there. And you can, if you drive out there, you can probably visit one and go in and take a look at it. But that's all that's left. I mean, to the memory of the Pony Express. And I don't know how many of them are out there, but there are still some out there. And they're not being taken care of. They're being deteriorating. Yes, sir.
Was it always called the Pony Express, or did that name come later?
It was always called that. Yeah. It was always called. I mean, and you got Hickok was at one of those way stations. Wild Bill, when he was a young lad. Buffalo Bill, no, he wasn't there. I mean, but he wrote about it, and that's how they remembered it, because he wrote about it and said, "I was there. People remembered it until the first, as I said, bona fide historic account of the Express was published in 1900. Okay, and I got my little shirt on me. Okay, but up till that time, it was a forgotten part of American history. 2,000 miles, ladies and gentlemen, 2,000 miles in 10 days. And it takes me 5.5 hours to go 355 miles, maybe 1 or 2 stops. But what's that? I don't eat, I just run in and run out. But are you kidding? These guys rode at 15 to 20 miles an hour on those horses. And it took them, 2 minutes to change? You take the saddlebags off one, you throw it on the other. And do you ever see the way a Pony Express rider mounted? The horse would start to run. He would grab the side of the handle, he would bounce, boom, boom, and then into the saddle, and the horse is gone. I mean, that horse is moving when that rider mounted. There were no stirrups or anything like that. We're not talking big saddle horns. No. That horse was moving, and then he would grab it, and he would bounce, he would run, boom, boom, and then he would swing into that saddle. He was light enough to do that. He didn't weigh a lot, those men.
And they weren't very tall either.
I mean,
They weren't very tall
No, they
either.
well, I don't know how tall they were, but no,
They were like
so,
giant.
probably, no. And they ate in the saddle. They ate, but they could carry, which was lightweight. I mean, the weight and speed, that was it, weight and speed. Anything, yes, ma'am.
How much rest time did they get between their runs?
How much rest?
Yeah.
That's a very good question. Well, the stations at 80 miles where the riders were changed, it had bed and board and they could get some rest. I mean, they weren't there for days and days because there's a rider coming in from the opposite direction that's going to require this young man who's taking a breather to get back on the saddle and go the other way. I would imagine maybe no more than a day. Because as I emphasized, speed was the name of the game. I mean, you had to be fast. To deliver that meal in 10 days, you had to be moving. And those horses had to be able to carry them. You know, for all those miles. They changed horses every 15 to 20 miles. Riders every 75 to 80 miles. So the riders, okay, maybe had a day where they could rest, relax a little bit, grab a bite, if I could put it that way, and get ready to, I mean, they didn't have bathing facilities or anything like that. I mean, it wasn't a hotel here. I mean, it was pretty primitive out there on the prairie. But I don't think more than a day. That's my speculation. Probably no more than a day. And Hassel, the one I referred to, I mean, what? Riding 180 miles and turning around and riding 180 miles back because he thought he had to? What? Devotion? Commitment? My gosh. And again, it's a record. I mean, he rode 360 miles in just a couple of days. I mean, it's amazing. And was wounded at one of those. Was wounded. So they were committed group. I mean, I couldn't find any, with the exception of that one rider who refused to go because he was afraid he'd be attacked and was branded a coward. That's the only person I came across in my research that ever denied or refused to ride his route. And you might say, well, he had a justifiable reason, but the Express didn't think so. He was branded a coward. But he was the only one that I could come across that ever said, no, I'm not going. I'm not going to do this. And didn't. And suffered the consequences of that. Yes, ma'am.
Wait, why it started where they started and why is the rest not have a mail system? Was it a telegraph system up to that point where they started the Pony Express?
I'm sorry.
Why did they start the Pony Express?
Why did they start it in that?
Why did they start it?
At St. Joseph's.
Why did they start it at St. Joseph's?
Oh, St. Joseph. First of all, it was an ideal. It was right on the Missouri River. And it was a terminus from east to west.
Why didn't it go all the way across? Was it because there was
Well, that was,
telegraph?
there were no states. They were all territories.
Okay.
They were all territories. And tomorrow, when the president is here,
Yes.
and he will tell you that, you know, one thing about Mr. President Polk, and I'm giving some away here, and I might regret it, but I don't think so. He was the one from sea to shining sea. Okay, you got the Louisiana Purchase, right? Jefferson, but Polk extended the continental United States from the Atlantic to the Pacific, and beyond the Mississippi, there weren't states yet, there were territories. And that's what they called it, Nevada Territory, Utah Territory, Kansas Territory. And so they weren't states. So those writers had to map out their own route. You'll notice there were no little lines bearing from that red one there. That was the route, out and back. So they traveled over and eventually there was a trail there. I mean, you know.
They followed the Platte River in Nebraska.
I beg your
I
pardon?
said they followed the Platte River in Nebraska.
They followed the Platte River.
Yeah, well, the river, they did, landmarks that they recognized, rivers, things like that, yeah.
Are those forts still in existence?
I beg your pardon?
Are the forts still where they
The
are
forts,
today?
yeah.
Fort Kearney is, Fort Laramie?
Yeah, I mean, the forts were outlying, okay, they weren't dotted along the route, no. They had their weight, their change stations where they changed horses and where they stopped for a rest after 80 miles. That's where they rode to, okay, and that's what they knew. and landmarks, okay, when that route was mapped out early on. As I said, it took 2 months to organize and launch the Pony Express. Just 2 months. I mean, it was years and years and, oh, look at this or look at that. No, it was just 2 months. There was a human cry to get the news from east to west as fast as it could go. And of course, you've got the attraction of gold out there. Everybody had, wanted to get out there. So that's the Pony Express fulfilled a needed a gap in the mail system or the communication system of this country. And you look at it that way, you've got to understand and maybe even admire what these men did. I'm talking about not just the riders, the men who housed these way stations, took care of the horses, fed those men, gave them a place to rest. And the horse was ready by the time when the rider came in. His mount was ready to go. And they say, oh, well, I'm going to take a break while you saddle up my pony. No, that horse is ready to go. He took the mail, took it out of one horse, threw it literally over the side, over the back of the refreshing horse, jumped into the saddle and took off. 2 minutes. 2 minutes. 120 seconds. And he was gone, and that horse was gone. I mean, that horse didn't gallop. He didn't take his time to get going. That horse was at full gallop when that rider jumped into the saddle. And just incredible. That's incredible things that they did. They had to be young and virile and wiry, to do that. Some mature man, my God, he would break some bones trying to get on that horse. And the horses were made to run. As I said, they were only 600 pounds. I mean, that's all, and they're only 58 inches high. So they're not talking big, Budweiser Clydesdale here. These horses were made to run, and they endured. They endured. So they were specifically chosen for that one purpose. It's amazing. It really is. I mean, when I started to do this, the more I researched it, the more I became an admirer of what these men did, and why they're not more celebrated than I think that they are. They should be. Is beyond me. I don't know why. Anyway.
Thank you for today. Thank you.
Thank you.
So tomorrow, the president.
Yay. Kathy, should we come to chairs or leave them?
Yeah, can we pull them up and then we put them in those carriers? One there and one.
Everybody pulled up their chair and then
That'd be
Kathy
great.
won't have it.
I'm all for that.
How you doing? I haven't seen you in a while.
Okay, you're welcome.